Athui Yuat. Welcome to Africa 54. Here's what's coming up. Female activists, including 3 from Africa, were honored at the White House for their activism in defense of human and women's rights. Hundreds of Liberian refugees in Ghana's capital, Accra, have been left homeless after their decades-old camp was abruptly demolished. And in our health report, we'll look at the dangers of breast ironing, a practice that involves the flattening of a young girl's developing breasts using hard objects. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. A dozen female activists from different countries were honored Monday at the White House for their activism in defense of human and women's rights. VOA correspondent Veronica Balderas Iglesias has the highlights of the 2024 International Women of Courage Awards.
With First Lady Jill Biden and U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken as the hosts, a ceremony Monday at the White House honored the winners of the 2024 International Women of Courage Awards.
They're advocating for domestic workers in Bangladesh and people with disabilities in Afghanistan. They're exposing corruption in Uganda, combating sexual harassment in Japan, standing up for the children of wartime rape in Bosnia and Herzegovina, fighting for democracy in Belarus.
Lifting the voices of courageous women like those of this year's honorees is of special importance, said the First Lady.
Your great acts of courage can inspire others to perform their own, big and small. It's a song of the future reverberating through us, so we too can speak out and be the seekers of justice, the defenders of freedom.
Among the honorees was Iranian activist Fariba Baluch. Baluch was featured in a VOA documentary. She's a member of the marginalized Baluchi ethnic group and has shed light on the human rights crisis in Iran's Sistan and Baluchistan province, despite facing intimidation. Gambian honoree Fatou Balde spoke about her own fight to end female genital mutilation.
Eliminating FGM in 2030 is a specific target of the Global United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 5. Yet, in 2024 alone, there are 4.4 million girls at risk of female genital mutilation globally.
While 11 women were honored in person, the Cuban government prevented dissident Marta Beatriz Roque Cabello from leaving the island to receive her award. The work of 9 women from Nicaragua who were part of a group of political prisoners released there last year was also recognized in absentia by White House Director of Political Strategy and Outreach, Amy Reese.
All fighting tirelessly and at great personal risk against corruption, repression, discrimination, harassment, and dignity.
During their stay in the United States, the award winners will not only participate in high-level policy meetings and public speaking events, but also travel to Los Angeles to meet and work with American counterparts. Veronica Balderas Iglesias, VOA News, Washington.
Among those who won the U.S. Women of Courage Award were 3 women from Africa. VOA's Anastasie Tudieshe spoke to them in Washington, D.C. Here are excerpts from 2 of them: Fatou Balde, a Gambian activist, and Agatha Atuhaire, a Ugandan activist.
I was motivated to set up WILL due to my own personal experience of female genital mutilation. And I wanted to have a platform where I advocate against the practice at the community level, but also be able to engage policymakers to make sure that we have the laws to protect girls, and that where we have these laws, that they are implemented effectively.
For us to have our issues cared about, we need to report about them. But also, I have seen that women are more empathetic. You have more women in positions of power, you probably wouldn't have the issues we see of of people who don't care about children that are on the streets. We have so many street children in Kampala.
Two winners of the U.S. Women of Courage Award, Fatou Balde and Agatha Atuhaire. The world is preparing to celebrate International Women's Day on Friday with the theme Invest in Women, Accelerate Progress. This global day honors women's socio-economic, cultural and political achievements. Today, we're highlighting Sombo Muzata, an assistant professor in the Department of Political Science at James Madison University. She recently spoke with VOA's Paul Ndiho.
International Women's Day is basically a recognition of, the work that women do. It's a recognition of the value that women bring to the table. It's a recognition of the continued fight for women's rights.
For a lot of women, let's say on the continent, they really don't understand what it means to be recognized, to have a day that celebrates you. What would you say to those women?
It's not just a day. Women have to be recognized every single day. Women have to be recognized every month and every year. So let us embrace this specific day that has been set aside, and in addition to bringing out issues and that women have across the world, and specifically women in Africa have, let us also use this time as an opportunity to celebrate, because if we're recognizing the importance and value of women in the lives of everybody, we need to be able to celebrate the women.
From talking to you, you've told me that you've had to jump so many hurdles for you to get there. Walk me through maybe your journey, very briefly.
I grew up in Chupata. Chupata is a city in Zambia's eastern province. It's right at the border, close to the border with Malawi. Okay?
I've been there. I've crossed through there to Malawi.
Okay, that's
Yes.
interesting. Yeah, so coming from the neighborhood where I used to live to go to the school where I went, I crossed the stream. So to me, I always attach a lot of meaning and value to the stream that I crossed when going to school. As a young girl in first grade, a stream can be something so big, and you have to overcome it every single day. I had to overcome the fear of drowning in that stream every single day. I had to overcome the fear of probably being attacked by whoever, crossing the stream, because right at the place where there was a stream, there was lots of trees, lots of vegetation. It was very dense, and it was a very scary thing. So every single morning I woke up, I had to overcome that. And when going back home after school, I had to overcome the fear of the stream. I have to cross the stream. So I say that having had that experience as a little child growing up helped to build in me parts that I still use to this day. If there's something that I have to overcome, I stop and I say, okay, so what resources do I have? I look around, and how best can I make sure that I get over to the other side and don't drown in these streams? Paul, I always think about one of the times when I just stopped. When I came to the US, I learned that you have to put gas in your own car. So when I sat down in the car and I started crying, I cried about the fact that I was putting gas in the car. That's not supposed to be me to do that. I was crying about the fact that I needed to set up my own computer alone. And I was also crying about the fact that, look at you, Sombo, from being in rooms with presidents, prime ministers, senior government officials, senior private sector actors, now you are scanning chapters of books. It's very, very funny how the mind can just take you around, itself, and make you to think about yourself in a very, very different way.
It humbles you.
It was hard. It humbled me, and the mind humbles you.
Sombo Muzata is an assistant professor in the Department of Political Science at James Madison University. The U.S. government has announced new visa and economic sanctions on members of Zimbabwe's government for abuses of political, economic, and human rights. The Treasury Department designated 11 individuals, including President Emmerson Mnangagwa and Vice President Constantino Chiwenga, for their involvement in corruption and or serious human rights abuse. Joining us now from Dallas, Texas for more insight on the situation is Kennedy Masiye, an award-winning human rights lawyer who has represented human rights defenders in Zimbabwe. Mr. Masiye, hello and welcome to Africa 54.
Hello, and thank you for inviting me.
Now, what are some of the implications of these sanctions on a president and his vice president?
Yes, the implications of the sanctions pretty much narrowed down the regime of sanctions that members of the Zimbabwean government had. I would say that President Mnangagwa and Vice President Chiwenga were pretty much on the previous regime of sanctions. So this is a continuation of them being on sanctions, and also probably narrowing it down to the head of the government and also his inner circle.
Now, the U.S. has also announced visa and economic sanctions on members of the Zimbabwe government for political and human rights abuses. But the question is, how will these measures punish these individuals?
Yes, I think probably these measures might now be strictly, going towards those specific individuals who are mentioned in those sanctions. Just a comparison with the previous regime of sanctions, which pretty much had a blanket, sanction of members of the ruling party ZANU-PF and other entities that were associated with ZANU-PF. These ones pretty much are very clear as to who they are targeting, and also the organizations or companies that have been involved in corruption, which has been documented by several media houses and also human rights institutions.
In what ways will these sanctions impact Zimbabwe as a country and the U.S.-Zimbabwe relations?
Yes, I always compare with the previous regime of sanctions because these ones are pretty much now narrowing it down to the individuals, and also the impact might be that those targeted individuals might be put out there in the open for them to address the issues that are being raised by why these sanctions are available. President Mnangagwa being singled out, and his vice president as well, his family and other members, actually puts probably an introspective on some Zimbabweans to say that probably these sanctions are pretty much targeted to those individuals and not to the country as a whole.
Ken, thank you very much for your insight into this story. Mr. Masiye is an award-winning human rights lawyer. Now, the largest number of U.S. states will be holding presidential primaries for caucuses Tuesday. Over one-third of all the available delegates for both the Republican and Democratic nominees are at stake on what is popularly known as Super Tuesday. VOA's Carol Van Dam is standing by in Arlington, Virginia, and joins us live to tell us more. Hello, Carol.
Hi, Esther. How are you?
Well, I'm good, Carol. Tell us what Super Tuesday really means in this presidential campaign.
Well, it all started back in the 1970s, a long time ago, when there was a handful of states that were holding their primaries, which is kind of early in the calendar. Then by the 1980s, a bunch more states joined in. So now there are 15 states in one territory, the American Samoa Territory, all holding the date that they hold their primaries today. So they call it Super Tuesday because millions of people are going to the polls to cast their ballots for their Republican or their Democratic nominee.
Now, how likely is the Republican, the former President Donald Trump, likely to clinch the Republican nomination today?
He's looking very strong, but he probably will not be able to mathematically clinch it today. He will not be able to clinch it today. However, he could possibly clinch it as early as March 12th, when there's a handful of other states that will also be holding their primaries. He's very close. He still has Nikki Haley in the picture, the former South Carolina governor and UN ambassador. She actually scored her first victory this past weekend in nearby District of Columbia in Washington, where you are. And it was a significant victory, I guess, for her, but everyone realizes that there's not that many Republican voters in an overwhelmingly, Democratic city like Washington, D.C. So it only amounted to a few delegates, if that, for Nikki Haley. However, she did score bigger than a lot of analysts had expected in her home state. February 24th, she got about 40% of the vote to Trump's 60%. A lot of analysts had thought she wouldn't even do that well.
Carol, let's move on to the president, because President Biden is running for re-election and concerns have been raised about his age. How is his campaign handling that question?
He is 4 years older than Donald J. Trump. They are both elderly gentlemen, you can say, safely. But his campaign strategists are very eager, they say, to look forward to this campaign season, and they feel that they can really win on the issues. There's a lot of different issues that have come up this year, abortion being one of them, since the U.S. Supreme Court got rid of the legality of Roe v. Wade. It threw that out. So a lot of people, men and women in this country, were very upset about that. And so this election can be said that is driven by issues such as that. Also, with Biden and his backers, they feel that if people just focus more attention on what is actually being said by himself and by what Mr. Trump is saying, that they will come out ahead. That they feel that a lot of voters are feeling, Mr. Trump is just too far right and too aggressive for their palate.
Right, Paul, Carol, thank you very much for your insight there. Get back inside and see how the voting is continuing in Arlington, Virginia. Carol Van Dam reporting live for us from Arlington, Virginia. Still to come, hundreds are now homeless in Ghana after a Liberian refugee camp is destroyed. We'll have the details after the break.
This week on Straight Talk Africa, we'll have an in-depth interview with the Executive Director for UNAIDS, Winnie Byanyima, and her efforts to elevate the position of girls across the African continent.
Today, there are about 100 million girls not in school. The majority of them are in Africa.
We'll also take you to the International Women of Courage Awards, where the U.S. State Department is recognizing more than 190 women from 90 countries. Join me, Heidi Adams, on the next Straight Talk Africa.
In other news, the International Criminal Court says it will hold hearings in October to confirm charges against Ugandan warlord Joseph Kony, 62, leader of the Lord's Resistance Army, who has been on the run for almost 2 decades. Ghanaian President Nana Akufo-Addo says he will not decide whether to sign a controversial anti-LGBTQ+ bill into law until the Supreme Court rules on a legal challenge. The proposed legislation stipulates jail terms of 6 months to 3 years for engaging in LGBTQ+ sex and sentencing of between 3 to 5 years for promoting or sponsoring LGBTQ+ activities. And the Gambian parliament is examining a highly controversial bill on lifting a ban on female genital mutilation in force since 2015. The bill says female circumcision is a deep-rooted cultural and religious practice and that the ban infringes on the right to practice traditions. Authorities in Ghana have abruptly demolished a decades-old camp for Liberians who had fled a brutal war in their country. David Doyle has the details.
Hundreds of Liberians in Ghana's capital Accra have been left homeless after their decades-old camp was abruptly demolished. It had been a home to those who fled Liberia's brutal civil war through the 1990s. Liberian camp chairman Dennis Grion said people were surprised because authorities hadn't even made an announcement.
So at the end of the day, we thought it was like joke, but they begin to demolish. People you see sitting here, they lost almost everything they are.
Over its 35-year lifespan, the Liberian camp had developed into a thriving community with its own markets, schools and other services. On Monday, the refugees were sheltering in a school. In one classroom, Prince Kamara was trying to keep his studies going while others around him slept. But he said the demolition means he's not able to go to school.
Because all my stuff had been destroyed, my books, my uniform, every stuff had been destroyed. So due to that, I'm not going to school no more.
Grion, the camp chairman, says discussions between refugees and local authorities are ongoing, with appeals being made for government support and relocation. Many families have been queuing up to register for assistance at the Ghana Refugee Board. Some say they've been waiting for formal refugee status from the government since before the end of Liberia's civil war in 2003. Others have lived in Ghana their entire lives.
That was David Doyle of Reuters reporting. It's time for a health report, and joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu with details on a controversial practice. Hello, Lino.
Hello, Esther. Hello, everyone. A harmful practice called breast ironing or flattening is affecting nearly 4 million women in Africa, including some parts of Nigeria and Cameroon. The practice aims to delay development in adolescent girls. Gibson America has this story narrated by Salem Solomon.
Patience Williams was only 10 when she was subjected to a practice called breast ironing. Worried that she would attract attention from men, her mother pressed a hot object over her breasts to stall growth.
Actually, it's very painful. Immediately she's done. I used to feel my body is hot.
A decade later, Williams is calling for an end to the painful practice. Victoria Williams, who had also endured breast ironing, says she regrets putting her daughter through such an ordeal.
They did it to me. It worked. But when I gave birth to my own, I tried it, but it didn't work. My remaining 2 girls, I didn't do anything to them. All I am doing is that I used to draw them close to me, make them my friends. Anything bothering them, they will tell me.
While it's hard to determine how many women are impacted by the practice in Nigeria, about 3.8 million women across Africa are affected by breast ironing, according to the Africa Health Organization and International Health Agency. Choma Agwobu, a Nigerian gender rights activist, describes the harmful nature of the practice and how it violates basic rights.
Imagine somebody heating up a stone and depressing a part of your body because they don't want that part of your body to grow. Nobody has the right to determine the rate of growth of any other person's body.
Nigeria classifies breast ironing as criminal offense, as it does the practices of female genital mutilation and forced marriage. The country's Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act of 2015 specifically penalizes offenders who commit, quote, harmful traditional practices, end quote, with more than a 4-year jail term or a fine of up to $559 or 500,000 naira or both. However, despite the law's provisions, there is no known record in Nigeria of perpetrators facing punishment. Justice Dokulu, a political leader in Jokwe village, says his community is committed to working with the government to stop breast ironing.
But in some certain places like here, people still do it. My community leaders are people who listen to governments. They are doing their best to see that it will come to an end.
The practice can cause not only tissue damage but also trauma. Other side effects include malformation, delay in breast milk production, and infection. Activists like Agwobu and survivors like Williams say legislation isn't enough, and they're trying to raise awareness in communities where breast ironing is still accepted by spreading the word through the media and urging community leaders to condemn the painful practice. For Gibson Emeka in Abuja, Nigeria, Salem Solomon, VOA News.
Dr. Yunus Habib Yunus is General Surgeon at the State Specialist Hospital Maiduguri in Borno State, Nigeria. He discusses the dangers of breast ironing and what can be done to help the victims.
Actually, breast is, as we know, is one of the glands in the body, usually find more prominent in women of reproductive age. So most of the times, it's part of the sexual reproductive organ, usually for reproduction, for breastfeeding and other things. There are some harmful traditional practices that usually practices around the world, especially the African countries, where the breast is being flattened or even pounded or massaged in order to make it disappear or to retard its progression or growth. By definition, it's a process of flattening of the breast, usually in adolescence, and by using either heated materials or hard objects to reduce the growth of the breast or even to make it disappear completely. Usually you see the ladies or the mothers, grandmothers, aunties are the ones usually doing this. Breast, especially for adolescents, is a sort of self-esteem. An adolescent is subjected to certain things like this. Most of the times they seem to have low self-esteem. They seem to be isolated in society, a feeling of withdrawal as well because of withdrawal, isolation in society completely. In Nigeria, we also have it. We have it in Togo, in Kenya, in Ivory Coast, Cameroon also have it. Where you have 20 to 50% of the ladies of adolescent age having that breast ironing. At long run, some suggestions have said that it may even lead to cancer formation. So, but there are so many complications in terms of this medical complication. When it happens, we look at the complications in two forms: the immediate one and the long-term complication. Sometimes abscess formation. We try to drain it. We give them analgesia and we also give them antibiotics. We also seek for psychological support, where psychotherapy is also advocated for such victims. The first thing is awareness, and awareness comes in different levels. We have the international awareness, we have even the nationwide, the federal government, the state government. We also have even the NGOs, non-governmental organizations, the schools, and all other institutions responsible for this. I think at these levels, we're able to create more awareness for such practices.
That's our health report for today. To stay in touch, find me on X at Lenore Moudou. Back to you, Esther.
Thanks, Lenore. Be sure to watch Lenore Moudou's health report every Tuesday right here on Africa 54. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.